At a Colorado playground, a 3-year-old boy vanished without a sound. His mother had turned away for just 5 minutes to grab the diaper bag from her car, leaving him in the care of a kind woman who claimed to be a teacher. But when she returned, no clues surfaced until a janitor uncovered something chilling hidden behind a toilet in the park restroom. The wind in Oakridge Green Park carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and late spring blossoms. The late afternoon sun dipped just below the canopy of sycamore trees, casting golden beams across the cracked concrete path. Clara Evans adjusted the strap of her overstuffed tote and glanced toward the playground where her son Max was squealing with delight on the baby swing. His red sneakers kicked wildly in the air, his cheeks flushed with joy. It was a rare moment of peace, a fragile bubble of normalcy Clara hadn't felt in a long time. 3 years into single motherhood, Clara had learned to manage chaos. Between her full-time job at the local library and part-time freelance copywriting gigs, her days blurred into spreadsheets and sippy cups. But today she had promised Max some uninterrupted mommy time. No laptop, no deadlines, just slides, sand, and sunshine. A gust of wind reminded her of the sweater she had left in the back seat of her car. Clara rubbed her arms, suddenly aware of the cool shift in temperature. "Sweetie, I'll be right back," she called, pointing toward the parking lot. Max didn't seem to hear her over the giddy shrieks of other children. Just then, a voice beside her interrupted her thoughts. "If you need to grab something, I can keep an eye on him," said a woman sitting on the nearby bench. She had kind eyes, the kind that softened at the edges when she smiled, and wore a blue fleece pullover that read Volunteer Westside Preschool. She gestured toward the monkey bars, where 2 kids around 5 or 6 were hanging like little monkeys. Rebecca, my 2 are over there. I get it, Mom, life's a juggling act." Clara hesitated, unsure. Trusting a stranger with your child was one of those things you just didn't do. But something in Rebecca's calm demeanor disarmed her. She looked like every other mom at the park, messy ponytails, sneakers, a diaper bag beside her feet. Normal. "Just 2 minutes," Clara said cautiously. "The gray Corolla right over there." Rebecca nodded. "Go ahead, I've got him." Clara sprinted across the grass, past the picnic tables, toward her car. She felt oddly nervous, fumbling with her keys as she retrieved the knit sweater and Max's water bottle. 2 minutes, maybe 3. She zipped the tote closed and turned back. The swing was empty. Her heart skipped once, then again, thudding into panic. She scanned the area. No Max, no Rebecca. She darted to the monkey bars. The 2 kids still played, laughing loudly, but they were alone. "Max?" Clara called, her voice slightly elevated. No answer. She rushed to the sandbox, then the slides. "Max, sweetheart?" Her tone sharpened. Still no sign. The other parents began to notice. One woman looked up from her phone. A dad stepped out of the way. Clara's throat dried as she ran to the restroom nearby and flung open the heavy door. The small space echoed with her footsteps. Empty. She opened every stall, checked under the counters. Nothing. Max was not in the restroom. Back outside, her chest began to tighten. The woman, the one with the kind eyes, Rebecca, was gone. So was Max. Clara sprinted to the parking lot. She reached her car, then looked around wildly at every vehicle nearby. There was no blue fleece, no toddler, no trace of either. The bench where Rebecca had been sitting was now vacant. A woman pushing a stroller gave her a concerned look. "Are you okay?" "My son, he was right here." "And the woman, Rebecca, she said she was watching him while I—" Clara couldn't finish the sentence. "Do you want me to call someone?" the woman asked gently. "Yes," Clara rasped. "Call 911. The next few hours unraveled into a blur of flashing red and blue lights, yellow police tape surrounding the park's entrance, and Detective Markson asking questions Clara could barely comprehend. "How long were you go?" "Describe the woman again." "Did you notice what direction they may have gone?" Clara's mind struggled to replay every detail. She said she was a preschool volunteer. She had a fleece with a logo, brown hair, average height. Did you see a car?" "I wasn't gone long enough to—" "I thought she was just another mom." By sunset, Clara sat in the back of a patrol car, her hands trembling as she clutched Max's forgotten water bottle. The park had emptied. The police were now canvassing nearby homes. A missing child alert was issued. Clara's ex-husband Ian was called, though their last conversation had ended in a shouting match over visitation rights. Clara couldn't shake the image of Max's red sneakers swinging through the air just an hour ago. And now, gone, taken by someone she had never seen before, someone who had seemed trustworthy, who had smiled, who had said she was a mother. By 10 p.m. the park had fallen silent except for the occasional squawk of radios. No new leads, no sightings, no surveillance cameras at the park. Clara sat alone on the curb, her sweater clutched to her chest like armor. The wind had turned bitter, and she could still hear Max's laugh in her ears, ghostly, distant, and heartbreaking. Clara barely slept the first night. She remained at the police station in a cold plastic chair, wrapped in the same sweater she had retrieved from her car the moment that started it all. Her fingers trembled from exhaustion, but her mind raced relentlessly. Every 5 minutes she rechecked her phone as if Max would magically call or someone would message with good news. But there was nothing, just the steady tick of the wall clock, echoing her helplessness. Detective Markson reappeared early the next morning, holding a tablet in his hand and wearing the kind of weary expression that made Clara sit up straighter. "We found something," he said, voice low. Clara leaned in, heart stuttering. He tapped the screen footage from a private security camera mounted on a hardware store across the street from the park's west entrance. The grainy footage played. Clara's breath caught as the timestamp flickered. 5:17 p.m., just minutes after she had left Max with Rebecca. On the screen, a woman, definitely Rebecca, walked calmly beside a small child in a red hoodie. Max, his tiny hand nestled trustingly in hers. They weren't running, no signs of panic. They looked like any mother and son walking to their car. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth. He's holding her hand. He looked. And in this footage, they move out of frame before the angle shows the lot, but we're canvassing nearby businesses for additional angles. Clara closed her eyes briefly, willing herself not to spiral. That was something. She clung to it like a lifeline. The rest of that day passed in a blur of interviews, formal statements, and a growing web of questions. By nightfall, Clara was back home, but refused to rest. She pulled out every photo of Max she had and sorted them by outfits, angles, details, anything that might help. It was past midnight when her phone rang. She answered on the first ring. "Ms. Evans," said a tired male voice. "This is Officer Chen from the Oak Ridge Maintenance Division. I believe we've found something that may relate to your case." Clara sat upright. "What is it?" "A janitor named Miguel Cortez found clothing items in one of the restrooms at Martin Ridge Park. That's about 6 miles from Oak Ridge Green. He called it in, and we've dispatched forensics to confirm." "I thought you'd want to be notified." "Clothing," Clara echoed. "Like what?" "A child's navy jacket and a gray knit beanie with a red pom-pom, tucked behind a water tank in the women's restroom." Clara's pulse surged. Max had worn that jacket all winter. The beanie was a gift from his grandmother. "Were they bloody?" "No," Chen replied. "No visible signs of trauma. But there's something else." Clara waited, holding her breath. "The jacket has smears of reddish soil. Very fine-grained. Not from Oak Ridge. Our team is bagging the items now and sending them to the lab. The soil might give us an idea where they've been." Clara nodded slowly, trying to absorb everything. "Can I see them? Detective Markson will contact you first thing in the morning. We'll want you to verify." She hung up and stared into the darkened room. Claire remembered Max playing in the backyard sandbox last summer, how the reddish clay would cling to his shoes for days. But there was no red clay in Oak Ridge. None in her home. So where had they taken him? The next morning, Clara met Markson and a forensics tech named Denise at the evidence room. Laid out before her were the jacket and hat, now sealed in plastic. She didn't need more than a glance. "That's his," she whispered. "Both of them." Denise nodded. "We've swabbed them for DNA and taken soil samples for testing. We'll expedite the lab work, but even preliminary visual analysis suggests the soil is consistent with areas northeast of here. That puts us near Red Bluff or possibly closer to the state line." Claire looked at Markson. "So she's traveling? She's trying to get out of the area?" "It's one possibility," he said. "The placement of the clothing was deliberate, hidden but not thoroughly." almost like someone wanted them to be found, but not too easily. "Why would she do that?" Clara asked. "Why leave his clothes?" "Diversion," Markson said. "To confuse the timeline. Or mislead us about where they're heading. Or maybe she's trying to communicate," Clara added quietly. Markson studied her. "You think she wants to be found?" "No," Clara said, "but I think she wants me to know she has him and that he's alive." That thought chilled her more than comforted. This wasn't random. Whoever Rebecca was, she knew how to blend in. She knew how to look like a mother. She knew how to act calm under pressure. She was methodical. That was worse than impulsive. That meant this was planned, deliberate, a controlled abduction. Clara's phone buzzed again. A new message from a blocked number. No text, just a single photo attachment. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The image was blurry, taken from behind, likely a quick snapshot on a phone. A woman with a dark ponytail stood near a vending machine at a gas station. A small child, Max, was beside her, holding a juice box. His face wasn't visible, but Clara knew those sneakers, the same red ones from the park. She felt her knees weaken. "Detective," she said, voice cracking, "they just sent me a photo. Of him now." Maxon took the phone, examining the image closely. "It's time-stamped this morning," he muttered. "Gas station near Highway 38. They're moving northeast," Clara whispered. "Just like you said." "We need to lock this down fast," Markson said, already dialing. "If they're heading for Red Bluff, we've got under a day before they hit open country. Fewer towns, fewer eyes." Claire stood in place, frozen between panic and grim resolve. Her son had been taken, but he was alive, and the trail wasn't cold yet. Somewhere out there, a woman pretending to be a mother was walking hand in hand with her son, as if he were hers, as if he belonged in her world, not Clara's. But Clara was done sitting still. She would follow this trail to the edge of the earth if she had to, because now, finally, they had a direction, and for the first time since Oak Ridge Park, Clara Evans had a reason to hope. The photograph of Max at the gas station set off a flurry of action. By midday, police had distributed the image statewide, hoping for any tip that might narrow the chase. Clara was still at the station, fatigue etching deep shadows beneath her eyes, when Detective Markson re-entered the room with an unreadable look on his face. "We've been going through people in your circle again," he began, placing a folder on the table, trying to eliminate or confirm possibilities. Clara's heart sank. "Ian?" Markson nodded. "He moved back to Colorado last month, right?" "Yes," she said cautiously. "He's renting a condo in Hill Ridge." "You two don't speak?" "Only about Max. He wasn't happy about the custody arrangement, but he's been civil lately." Markson opened the folder. "We brought him in this morning." "What?" Clara's pulse kicked up. "You arrested him?" "No. Voluntary interview. He said he was working from home the day Max disappeared. Said he had a video meeting with a client, but couldn't produce a recording. No calendar invite, no email, no witness." "So basically nothing," Clara said. "Not nothing," Markson corrected. "We checked his phone logs that day, but we did find something else." He pulled out a printout. 6 months ago, Ian joined an online forum for single parents. We dug a little deeper. 4 months ago, he started private messaging with someone named Rebecca Hanley. Clara sat up. "Hanley? She told me her name was just Rebecca at the park, but Hanley, I've seen that name, somewhere." "We pulled the full chat history," Markson said. "It started out innocent. She was posting about being a single mom. He responded. They messaged weekly, then more frequently. By last month they were exchanging dozens of messages a day, shared photos, planned to meet in person." Clara's mind reeled. "So Ian knew her?" "He claims he never met her in real life," Markson said. "He said she ghosted him 2 weeks ago, deleted her account, but he admitted he was infatuated. Said she reminded him of the kind of life he thought he missed out on." Clara pushed her hands through her hair, trying to reconcile the man she once married with the one under suspicion. Did he know she was going to take Max? He denies it, swears he had no idea she even knew about Max. But he mentioned Max in the forum. I saw one of his old posts once. About joint custody? Markson tapped the folder again. And it's not hard to put two and two together if someone's motivated. We also found a saved photo in his chat history, the one you posted last Christmas. Max in his elf pajamas. That image was shared with her. Clara's breath hitched. So she had his face. His clothes. She could easily recognize him. It's possible she targeted you through him, Markson said. Or it could be they planned something together. Ian's not stupid, Clara murmured. He's selfish, he's vindictive, but he wouldn't hurt Max. At least, not like this. We're not charging him, Markson clarified. Not yet, but we're watching him. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She pulled out her old laptop and logged into an archived parenting forum she hadn't used in over a year. She searched for posts under the username RebeccaHand78. Nothing. She expanded the search using partial strings, tracking through comment threads, message likes, and group invites. After an hour, she found a cached profile, a profile that had posted under 3 different aliases, all of which included variations of the name Rebecca, or initials RH. The profile photo was generic, a beach sunrise, but the writing style was familiar, calm, polished, full of maternal wisdom and empathy. Clara traced the digital breadcrumbs until she landed on one post from 6 weeks ago. A woman named Arhe shared a story about bonding with a boyfriend's child over gardening. The language was intimate, territorial. She mentioned how hard it was to watch a child be pulled between houses, and how a stable home with 2 devoted parents is every child's right. Clara's blood turned cold. The tone wasn't just opinionated, it was possessive, and it sounded uncomfortably close to something Ian had once said during their custody mediation. Max needs a home, not a visitation schedule. She copied the post, her hands shaking. As she scrolled down, another comment caught her attention, from a user named ENM10979. I agree. Kids deserve consistency. My ex thinks structure means overscheduling. Sometimes I wish I could just take him and go somewhere quiet. Clara felt physically ill. She opened her old photo cloud and searched the crisp. The image of Max in his elf pajamas popped up, all giggles and hot cocoa in hand. It had been private, shared only through email and once posted in a locked forum thread. She clicked through the sharing settings. At some point, someone had downloaded it. Possibly Ian. Possibly someone else. The next morning, Clara showed the forum posts to Detective Markson. I think she planned this through him, she said. She used his bitterness. She made herself indispensable. She mirrored his frustrations until he believed she understood him better than I ever did. Markson nodded grimly. People in denial are easily manipulated, especially if it confirms what they already want to believe. And Max became the center of that delusion. We're working on tracing Rebecca Hanley's real identity, he said. We believe it's an alias. There's no state record, no license, no utility bills under that name. Then how did she get a preschool fleece, make herself look so convincing? Think she was a teacher once, or a daycare worker, possibly someone who lost custody of her own child. Clara stared out the window, her thoughts spinning. Then she wouldn't just want Max. She'd want to replace something, or someone, she lost. Markson nodded again. And if that's true, she won't treat him like a pawn. She'll treat him like her own. Clara didn't know whether that comforted or terrified her more. Outside, the clouds were thickening, casting a gray wash over the streets of Colorado Springs. Somewhere beneath those clouds, Max was with a woman who believed she could give him a better life, a woman who might have been just another online voice, a profile picture, a comforting message, until she stepped out of the screen and into Clara's real world. Clara looked back at Markson. You said Ian claims he never met her in person, but what if that's not true? You think he's lying? I think, Clara said slowly, he was prepared to look the other way. Maybe he didn't plan it, but maybe, when it happened, he didn't try to stop it. Markson studied her carefully. Then we need to know where he was every hour since Max disappeared. Clara nodded, already knowing what she had to do. Ian had told her he kept Max's old documents, birth certificate, medical history, because she once asked him to scan them. He never gave them back. She stood up, her jaw set. I'm going to his place. If he's involved, there's a trail there, and I'm going to find it." Markson hesitated, then said, "We can talk if you're there, but to me, he might." She grabbed her keys and walked out into the cold gray afternoon, her heart a knot of dread and determination. She didn't know exactly what she would find at Ian's place, but whatever secrets he was keeping, she was ready to pull them into the light. Clara parked 2 houses down from Ian's condo and sat in her car for a few minutes, gathering herself. She hadn't been here since the final mediation nearly a year ago, and the last time she'd stood at his front door, Max had been crying in her arms, confused by why Daddy wasn't coming with them. Today there was no Max, just a mother with a rising storm in her chest and a growing certainty that this was no longer a matter of doubt, but a question of proof. She climbed out of the car and walked briskly toward the unit, noticing that the blinds on the living room window were drawn. The front steps were swept clean. The silence was unnerving. She rang the bell once. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. Reaching under the corner mat, she found the spare key exactly where Ian used to keep it, and without hesitation she unlocked the door and slipped inside. The house smelled like aftershave and lemon cleaner. It was too quiet. She called out once, "Ian?" but there was no response. Clara walked through the narrow hallway lined with untouched picture frames, stock images of smiling couples still tucked into their hut instead of real photos. A strange hollowness clung to everything. The living room was tidy to the point of being sterile. No sign of recent life, no dishes, no clutter. On the kitchen counter sat a neatly stacked pile of unopened mail and an empty ceramic fruit bowl. She moved down the hall toward the master bedroom. There the contrast became evident. A half-zipped duffel bag lay on the neatly made bed, half filled with folded clothes. In the corner stood something she hadn't expected, a brand-new diaper bag, still with a sales tag, and beside it a small, soft-sided cooler. Clara approached the dresser, opening drawers carefully. Inside the top drawer, nestled among rolled-up socks, she spotted a tiny velvet box. She opened it and froze. Inside lay a child's bracelet, delicate, silver, clearly new. The engraving read, "To M.R. Love Always." Her first instinct was confusion. Max emissions were M.E., Maxwell Evan. M.R. didn't match. She turned the bracelet in her hand, inspecting its pristine surface, as if a second glance would make it make sense. It didn't. Who was M.R.? Why was a bracelet for a child in Ian's drawer? Clara's gaze shifted to the diaper bag. She unzipped it. Inside were diapers, size 4, Max's size, wipes, a pacifier still in its packaging, and a folded note that looked like a checklist: snacks, juice, extra socks, quiet toys, documents. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't leftover baby gear from Max's infancy. This was fresh. This was packed. This was a go bag. She heard the faint crunch of gravel outside the window. Her pulse jumped. Quietly, she moved to the living room and peered through the blinds. A dark gray SUV was pulling into the driveway. Clara ducked, watching from the narrow slit. A woman stepped out of the vehicle. Tall, slim, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She moved with practiced ease, pulling a soft-sided cooler from the back seat and then a wrapped infant cooler from the back seat. Clara's breath caught. This wasn't a romantic partner coming over. This was a caretaker, a planner, a woman preparing for a child. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a key. She unlocked the front door with no hesitation and stepped inside. Clara backed into the hallway and pressed herself against the wall. Her heart thundered. She didn't know whether to confront the woman or wait. The sound of the door opening and closing was muffled but unmistakable. Soft footsteps moved through the entryway, and then a pause, making to place the cooler down. Clara moved quickly and silently back toward the master bedroom, grabbing the bracelet and the note from the diaper bag, slipping them into her coat pocket. Then she crept toward the guest bathroom and eased the door shut behind her, holding her breath as the hallway filled with footsteps again. She heard the bedroom door creak open. A pause, a rustling of bags. The woman was moving through Ian's things with too much familiarity. Clara strained to hear. The woman made a phone call. "Yeah, I'm here. It's all set. He said he'll be back by 6. I'll pack the rest of what she needs." No, he hasn't told her. That's the point. A silence. Then, "No, I'm not worried. She's distracted by the police now. By the time she figures it out, we'll be gone." Clara's breath hitched in her throat. She. That was her. Ian hadn't told her anything because he was helping cover this woman's track. The bathroom air grew thick. She gripped the edge of the sink to stay upright. Her son's disappearances wasn't just connected to Ian's silence. It was possibly facilitated by it. The bracelet, the diapers, the checklist, the woman with a car seat. It was a plan. And it was already in motion. The woman's footsteps retreated. The front door clicked shut again. Clara waited a full minute before stepping out, her legs unsteady. She checked through the window and saw the SUV backing out of the driveway. Only then did she exhale and move quickly to the desk in Ian's office, rifling through drawers until she found a locked file box. She grabbed the entire box and carried it out the back door to her car. Once safely inside, she drove 2 blocks away, parked, and cracked open the box. Inside were Max's original birth certificate, immunization records, and a second folder labeled Travel. She flipped through it, copies of passports, including one that didn't belong to anyone she knew. A woman named Rebecca Lynn Hanley, and 1 child, Mac. It all fell into place. Rebecca wasn't just someone Ian chatted with, she was someone he conspired with. And Mason R., whoever that was the child she imagined Max to be. Clara's hands trembled as she photographed every document and emailed them to Detective Markson from her phone. Then she started the engine again, her eyes scanning the street for any sign of that gray SUV. The woman had been too comfortable, too casual. She had a key, she had a car seat, and she had no idea Clara had seen her. Somewhere inside Ian's carefully kept lies was the truth about where Max was. And now Clara had the first piece she needed to start pulling that truth out into the light. She just didn't know yet how much worse it would get. Clara didn't return to the station right away. She couldn't, not when the image of that woman walking so casually into Ian's house was burned into her brain, and not when a tiny silver bracelet and a folder full of falsified documents had made everything feel terrifyingly real. Instead, she parked at a gas station off Highway 14 and waited. She had driven with the kind of single-minded focus only desperation could produce, her thoughts racing through timelines and phone calls. Through every moment, Ian had seemed distant or distracted or dismissive over the past few months. It had all led here. She had copied the license plate of the SUV as it left Ian's driveway, and now she sat with her phone in hand, ready to follow it if she saw it again. The SUV returned an hour later, pulling into the gas station to fuel up. Clara didn't hesitate. She slid behind the wheel of her car, waited for the vehicle to exit, and began to follow it at a safe distance. The woman drove with confidence, no hesitation, clearly familiar with the route. Clara kept her car 3 vehicles behind, blending into the late afternoon traffic. The journey took them out of town, then gradually up into the forested foothills that bordered northern Colorado. As the elevation rose, so did Clara's heart rate. Trees thickened, cell signal waned, and the woman in the SUV showed no signs of stopping. After nearly 90 minutes, the vehicle turned down a gravel road marked only by a faded green sign, "Private property, no trespassing." Claire slowed. She let the SUV get far ahead before cautiously turning onto the same path. The road wound through tall pines and around boulders. Finally, at a bend just before a small clearing, Clara spotted the cabin. It was old but sturdy looking, with a rusted tin roof and smoke curling from a chimney. The SUV was parked in front beside a covered porch. A motion light flickered on as dusk settled. Clara killed her engine and coasted to a stop in a pocket of trees 50 yards away, hidden by thick underbrush. She watched through binoculars. The woman, Rebecca, it had to be her, unloaded the back of the SUV methodically. A duffel bag, a small box, a stuffed animal, a child's blanket. Clara's hands trembled slightly. She had come here on instinct, on desperation, but this was confirmation. She raised the binoculars again as the front door opened. A boy emerged first, around 6 years old, lanky, with a mop of dark blonde hair. He ran barefoot onto the porch, laughing, and leaped into Rebecca's arms. She hugged him tightly, smoothing his hair. Then another figure stepped out. Clara's breath caught. He was smaller, with shorter, dark hair and wearing unfamiliar clothes, khaki shorts, a navy tee with dinosaurs in it, and he hugged his world froze, Max. Even from a distance, she knew the curve of his chin, the shape of his ears, the way he rubbed his right eye when tired. He looked changed. His curly hair had been trimmed short, his usual colorful socks were gone, but his gait, the way he stood slightly pageant-toned, those were details no disguise could hide. Clara fought back tears. He was alive. He wasn't in pain. He was here. But then she heard it. Rebecca called out to the boy, but not as Max. She said, "Mason, dinner." The name echoed in the clearing. Max looked up, responded with a nod, and followed the other boy inside. Clara lowered the binoculars slowly, heart hammering. Mason. They had given him a new name. They were rewriting his identity. And Max, her Max, had responded to it. She wanted to scream. She wanted to burst through the trees and grab her son and run. But she forced herself. This wasn't about feelings. It was about safety. If she rushed in, there could be others inside. She had no idea what Rebecca was capable of. She needed backup. Clara reached for her phone. No service. Of course. The mountains were a dead zone. She couldn't risk driving back into town yet. If they left tonight, she'd lose them. She needed eyes on the house. For the next 2 hours she watched. The lights inside flickered on. Shadows moved behind the windows. At one point the boys came out again to collect firewood. Mason, carried a small basket. The older boy helped. They spoke, laughed even. Clara's heart ached at the sound. It was innocent, it was normal, and it was wrong. Rebecca stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them like a hawk. She didn't yell. She didn't grab. She looked like a mother. That terrified Clara more than anything. As darkness deepened, the boys went back inside. Rebecca lingered on the porch, phone in hand, pacing slowly. Clara used the binoculars again. She saw Rebecca smile at something on the screen and type quickly. A few minutes later, she watched her pull a thin folder from her bag and flip through its contents under the porch light. Even from this distance, Clara recognized the maroon border of a passport, then another. Rebecca had documents for the boys. Clara didn't know how many or how legitimate they were, but the implication was chilling. This wasn't a temporary hideout, it was a staging ground. They were preparing for something. Possibly departure. Possibly disappearance. Suddenly the front door opened again and a man stepped out. Clara couldn't see his face clearly in the porch light, but she recognized the posture immediately. Ian. He walked over, kissed Rebecca briefly, and took one of the passports from her hand. Clara's chest tightened. She fumbled for her camera, zoomed in, and took several photos in silence. Max's father. Here. With her. With them. She sat back in the driver's seat numb, trying to process the full scope of betrayal. Ian hadn't just facilitated this, he was inside it. Literally. He had come here, he had touched Max, he had stood by while Rebecca renamed and redressed their son. What else had he done? What had Max been told? Clara wiped her face quickly. She couldn't think like a mother right now. She had to think like someone who was going to bring them down. Her phone still had no service, but her car's GPS tracking was working. She marked the cabin's coordinates, saving the location under Safe House. Then she wrote a note to herself in the memo app. Max confirmed alive, going by Mason. Cabin used by Rebecca and Ian. Possible escape plan in motion. Evidence secured. Must get signal. Urgent response needed. She saved it, then lowered her seat and wrapped herself in the emergency blanket from the trunk. She would stay the night here if she had to. Wait for movement. Because now she knew where her son was. And she wasn't letting him out of her sight again. Not until... The sun was barely up when Clara drove back down the mountain road far enough to regain cell signal. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Detective Markson's number, and he answered after the second ring, voice tight with sleep but instantly alert. "Clara, are you okay?" She wasted no time. "I found him. Max. He's alive. They're at a cabin northeast of Miller's Ridge. I have the exact GPS coordinates. Ian is there too. They've changed his name. He's being called Mason. There's another boy, maybe 6 years old, named Luca. And Rebecca, she's there. I saw her." There was a pause on the line. "You're absolutely sure it's Max?" "I watched him for hours. It's him. His hair is cut and he's wearing different clothes, but it's Max. He looked—" Markson's tone hardened. "We'll move immediately. Stay close, but do not approach again. I'm dispatching a tactical unit and requesting a judge sign a warrant to search the property," Clara agreed, ending the call and forwarding every photo and note she had taken during the long night. An hour later, the clearing filled with unmarked vehicles, officers in bulletproof vests, and the echo of orders barked through radios. Clara stayed back, breath frozen in her chest as she watched the team approach the cabin. They moved quickly and precisely, guns drawn, but voices calm, containing the situation before it had a chance to escalate. Ian and Rebecca were taken into custody without resistance. Max and the other child, Luca, were found inside, startled, sleepy, but unharmed. Later that morning at the county station, Markson met Clara in the hallway with a grave expression and a thick folder under his arm. "We've started processing the evidence found inside the cabin," he said. "There's a lot you need to know." Clara nodded, heart pounding. They stepped into a private interview room. Markson opened the folder, spreading its contents across the table. First, we confirmed Rebecca's identity. Her full name is Rebecca Lynn Hanley. Former preschool teacher. She worked at Pinebrook Early Learning Center in Denver until 2 years ago when she was fired. Clara frowned. Why was she fired? For falsifying her application, Markson replied. She lied about having a valid teaching credential, used a forged state certification number. When the daycare ran a background check during an audit, they found inconsistencies and terminated her immediately. No charges were filed at the time, but she vanished from the system shortly after. Clara looked at one of the printouts, a staff photo from the daycare's website, now annotated with a red marker. "Rebecca," he said. Her smile in the image was identical to the one she wore that day in the park, warm, harmless, trustworthy. "She's been planning something like this for a long time," Clara said softly. "Maybe since she lost her job, or maybe even before." "We think so too," Markson agreed. "But it gets worse." He pulled out a stack of documents. These were recovered from a hidden compartment under the floorboards of the cabin's master bedroom. Forged documents, multiple sets, all pristine, all professionally printed. And not just for travel. There are insurance forms, immunization records, enrollment letters for a school in Toronto. Clara's eyes scanned the top sheet, a Canadian passport with the name Mason R. Morgan. The photo was unmistakably Max, though his name and birth date had been altered. The passport listed him as 4 years old, not 3, and under the parentage of Ian Morgan and Rebecca Hanley. She grabbed the next one, Luca's file. His name was unchanged, but his birth certificate had been doctored to show Ian as his legal guardian. They were pretending to be a family, Clara whispered. A family unit, ready to relocate. "Yes," Markson said grimly. "They weren't going to disappear in chaos. They were going to disappear with paperwork that looked legitimate enough to pass casual inspections. They would have crossed into Canada, settled down, and possibly enrolled the boys in school within weeks." Clara picked up another sheet, boarding passes dated for next Tuesday. They had a timeline. "We suspect they were waiting for new identification to be delivered. Some of it is still incomplete. That delay likely bought us the time we needed." Markson slid a small evidence bag across the table. Inside was the silver bracelet Clara had found. "To M.R.," she read aloud again, tears stinging her eyes. "It wasn't just about Max," Markson said. "It was about turning him into someone else, giving him a new identity, one that fit their fantasy." Clara nodded slowly. "And Luca? What about him?" "He's Rebecca's biological son," Markson replied. "No father on record. From what we've gathered, she's raised him alone for the last 5 years. No stable employment, no consistent address. The two have been drifting between rentals and short-term housing for a while." Clara processed this, thinking of the way Luca had hugged Max on the porch. He thought Max was his new brother. "Very likely. We've spoken to him briefly. He referred to Max as Mason several times and said they were moving to a place with a beach soon." Markson's voice softened. The boy doesn't understand what's happened. He thinks this is a family vacation. Clara pressed her hands against the table, steadying herself. What did Ian say? He claims Rebecca manipulated him, that he didn't plan any of this, only followed her lead after things began moving too far to stop. He says he believed Max would be better off with a full-time family. Clara's voice cracked. He's lying. He sent her that bracelet. He kept Max's documents. He had to know. We think he did. The fake records list him as the legal guardian. That doesn't happen by accident. He'll be charged, and Rebecca, she's facing federal charges for abduction, identity fraud, and conspiracy. Clara's hands curled into fists. She tried to erase me, not just take him, but erase me. That's what makes this so dangerous, Markson said. She didn't want ransom. She didn't want leverage. She wanted to replace you. Clara leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of everything she now knew pressing down on her chest. Max had been renamed, reimagined, and almost relocated under a new life, with people who had constructed a world around a lie. And if she had been just one day later, they might have disappeared across the border forever. She looked again at the forged passports, the family photos printed on glossy paper, the notes detailing a new bedtime routine that matched Max's schedule almost exactly. They had studied him, memorized his patterns. She shivered at the thought. Markson flipped to another folder. There's something else. Inside Rebecca's notebook, we found journal entries. Dozens of them. Planning stages, one page in particular, stood out. He slid the photocopy across. Clara read the title at the top, How to Become the Mother He Deserves. Her stomach twisted. She didn't need to read more. But she did. Word by word, each line described how Rebecca planned to win Max's trust, how to feed him his favorite snacks, how to ease him into the name Mason by associating it with praise. Clara stopped halfway through. She couldn't read another word. Her son had been studied like a project, reshaped to fit into a fantasy. She looked up at Markson, her voice barely audible. "Can I see him now?" Markson gave a small nod. "He's with a child advocate and a social worker. We'll take you there now." Clara gathered her things, clutching the silver bracelet in her palm. She walked down the hallway with Markson by her side, each step drawing her closer to the room where her son, still Max, always Max, was waiting. She didn't know what he would remember or what name he would say when he saw her face, but she knew one thing without doubt. No forged paper, no fantasy, no substitute could take her place. She reached for the doorknob. Clara stood just outside the observation room, watching Max through a two-way mirror. He sat cross-legged on a carpeted floor, a juice box in one hand and a stuffed dinosaur in the other, quietly talking to the child advocate. His hair was shorter, his clothes unfamiliar, and his voice slightly hoarse from days of emotional strain, but his eyes, the way they darted nervously at unfamiliar sounds, were unmistakably his. She hadn't been allowed to enter yet. The professionals wanted to ease him into recognition, to avoid overwhelming him, but every second she was kept from him felt like a punishment. Markson had tried to prepare her. Reunions weren't always clean. Sometimes children retreated. Sometimes they cried for the wrong mother. She didn't care. She just wanted to hold him. But before she could knock on the door, Markson came rushing down the hallway, a phone pressed to his ear and urgency etched across his face. "They're moving," he said without preamble. "What?" Clara turned from the glass. "Who's moving?" "Rebecca and Ian," he said. Police had them in holding separately, but during transport to county jail, Rebecca faked a medical episode. In the chaos, she got a message out, likely to someone still on the outside. "The SUV we found yesterday is gone, and a second vehicle registered under an alias Ian used just pinged at a gas station near Route 67. Clara's mind reeled. They were supposed to be in custody. She had help, he snapped. "They're not together, but someone picked up one of the forged document packages this morning. Our best guess is that it's a courier meeting them on the move. They're trying to make it across the border. Not by highway this time, through the woods." "What about Max?" Clara's voice dropped. "He's here, he's safe, right?" Markson didn't answer. "Right away." Then he said quietly, "They were trying to take him again. The advocate distracted them long enough for us to intervene. But the decoy? They used Luca. Clara's breath caught. They were going to switch the boys? Yes, or claim they had only one child. We're still piecing it together, but it's clear they had a backup plan. So what now? We're going to intercept, he said. At the station near Border Trail. We believe they're waiting there for the delivery of new IDs. We've alerted Border Patrol and forest rangers. It's happening now. Clara's pulse surged. I want to go. No, I have to go, she insisted. If Max sees me, if he hears me, it might stop him from getting in that car again. Please. Markson hesitated. Then finally, you stay in the vehicle. Do not exit until I say. Minutes later, they were in an unmarked cruiser heading north, sirens off but urgency thrumming in the tires. Markson spoke in clipped updates on the radio, eyes scanning the horizon for signs of movement. Clara clutched her phone, staring at the grainy surveillance photo that had pinged the alert. Rebecca at a gas station, standing next to the same dark SUV, looking casual, one hand on her hip, the other resting protectively on Max's shoulder. He wasn't resisting. He was looking down, holding a granola bar. They reached the last known location in less than 20 minutes. A roadside gas station with 2 pump islands and a small convenience store surrounded by woods. The area was quiet, too quiet. No signs of the SUV at first. Then Clara spotted it, parked around the side near a tree line. The back door was open, a car seat visible. Ian stood beside it, adjusting something inside. Rebecca paced nearby, glancing down the road every few seconds. Clara's stomach clenched when she saw Max swinging nervously. Her hand reached for the door handle, which Markson ordered. He raised his radio. Units in position? Ready, came the reply. On your mark. But then everything changed. Ian reached into the car and began buckling Max into the seat. Rebecca turned and walked toward the edge of the woods, looking down at her phone. Clara couldn't take it anymore. He's getting in the car. She's locking the cabin. They're going to run again. Stay put, Markson said sharply. I said, stay put. But Clara had already thrown the door open. She sprinted toward the SUV, heart in her throat, voice raw. Max? The child flinched visibly. Rebecca turned sharply. Ian froze. Max, it's Mommy, Clara screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of desperation. Don't go with them. For a split second, everything paused. Max looked up. Recognition flickered, brief but bright, in his eyes. Mama? He whispered. Mama? Clara ran faster, but Rebecca moved too, grabbed the door, slammed it shut, turned toward Clara with wide, furious eyes. Then the sound of engines, sirens blared to life. 4 unmarked cruisers barreled out with guns drawn, and in the air, step away from the vehicle. Ian tried to run, bolting toward the woods. He didn't get far. 2 officers tackled him within seconds. Rebecca froze, arms half raised, then dropped to her knees without a word. Clara stood panting beside the SUV as an officer flung open the back door. Max, she said softly, reaching in. He stared at her, eyes full of confusion and recognition. Then he launched himself into her arms. Mama, he sobbed. Mama, I want to go home. Clara wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close, sobbing into his hair. You are going home, she whispered. I've got you. You're safe. Officers moved around them like shadows, securing the area, zip-tying Rebecca's wrists, hauling Ian to his feet. Clara didn't see any of it. All she saw was the boy in her arms, still hers, still alive, still reachable. She cradled his face between her hands. You remember me? Max nodded tearfully. She said you were gone, but I knew you'd come. I'll never be gone, she promised. Never. A medic checked Max over, gently, respectfully, confirming he had no injuries. His voice was hoarse, his eyes glassy, but physically he was okay. Clara didn't let go of his hand for a second. Markson approached slowly, his voice softer now. We got them both. The driver bringing their documents is in custody too. This entire network, whoever helped them, it's collapsing. Clara didn't answer. She simply nodded. Max looked up at her, small fingers curled around her thumb. Can we go home now? Yes, baby, she said. We're going home. But as she led him to the waiting cruiser, one question still lay buried behind those documents, behind Rebecca's careful smile, Bahajan's calculated betrayal. The interrogation room was cold and colorless, with a single overhead light casting sharp angles across the table where Ian Morgan sat, his hands cuffed in front of him, jaw tight, eyes fixed on nothing. Detective Markson entered the room quietly, dropped a thick folder onto the metal surface, and pulled out a chair opposite him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. "You've been read your rights, you know the situation, but what I want from you now is the truth. Why?" Ian scoffed lightly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "The truth?" he echoed. "The truth is complicated. Try me," Markson said flatly. Ian sat back, exhaled through his nose. "You want a motive? Fine. Clara made my life impossible after the divorce. Every drop-off became an interrogation. Every transparency decision I made was second-guessed, ridiculed. I went from being a father to a visitor with restrictions. Do you know what that does to a man?" "This isn't about custody disputes," Markson said sharply. "You abducted a child. You faked documents. You were about to cross an international border with a false identity. That's not resentment, that's premeditation." "I didn't plan it," Ian snapped. "Not like that. Not at first." "Then who did?" "Rebecca," he said, voice quieter now. She saw me on that single-parent forum. She messaged me after a post I made about feeling like I was losing my son. She was sympathetic, supportive, said she'd been through the same. We talked for weeks before we ever met." "And when you did meet, she was easy to be around," Ian admitted. "She never judged me. She listened, and she loved kids, especially Max, when she saw his photos. She said he looked like her son, said she could help me get him back." "Back from what?" "From Clara's grip," he said bitterly. "She painted me as unstable in court, twisted everything I ever said." Slowly, Rebecca understood that. "She said, why fight a broken system when we could just start over? Give Max a family where he wouldn't be torn between home every other weekend? So your solution was to steal him, to save him," Ian corrected, eyes flashing. "To build something new? He deserved peace, stability, a home." Markson shook his head slowly. "You mean he deserved to forget his mother? To be called another name? To vanish?" Ian didn't answer. Markson leaned forward again. "Tell me about the document. Who created them?" "Rebecca handled most of that. She said she had contacts. She'd used them before, back when—" He trailed off. "Back when what?" "She lost custody of her own son," Ian said reluctantly. "Years ago. Some kind of mental health evaluation? I didn't ask for details. She said the system failed her, that it would fail me too, that we could fix it together." Across the hall, in a separate room with muted walls and soft lighting, Rebecca sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Unlike Ian, she didn't fidget. Her gaze was direct, almost serene, as the female officer across from her read aloud the list of charges. When asked if she understood them, she nodded once, then said, "Yes." "I did everything you say," the officer blinked. "You admit to orchestrating the abduction?" "I do," Rebecca said calmly. "But I didn't do it to hurt anyone. I did it to heal something broken." "Please explain." Rebecca took a deep breath. 3 years ago, I lost my son, not to death, to the courts. He was 6. His name was Caleb. I was diagnosed with acute stress disorder and postpartum depression, and during an episode I left him alone briefly. No one was harmed, but the state took him. Permanently. I was never given a second chance. They said I was a danger, that I was unstable. But I wasn't. I just needed support. "That's tragic," the officer said neutrally. "But that doesn't justify—" "I'm not finished," Rebecca interrupted. "I started mentoring other single parents online, offering support anonymously. That's how I met Ian. He was angry, lost. Like I'd been, he loved his son but didn't know how to fight the system. I saw a way to help him. And maybe help myself, too. By taking Clara's child? By giving him the family he deserved," Rebecca said simply. Max wasn't thriving in that tug-of-war. Ian said he was anxious, always asking which house he'd sleep in. That Clara made every visit feel like a test. I believed we could do better, not just abduct and run, build something real, a family. "And the name? Mason." "I picked it," she said with a sad smile. "It was the name I would have given my second child, if I'd had one." "So, Max was never Max to you? He became Mason, she said. That wasn't erasure. It was rebirth. The officer sat back, stunned by the clarity in her voice. And the false passports? I created a full back school, Rebecca said. Jobs, homeschool registration, immunization schedules, everything a normal family would have. We were going to cross into Canada through the forest, then settle in the town where I once worked. Quiet, rural, no questions. She would survive, Rebecca said. She still had her life, her routines. She didn't need Max the way we did. Later that evening, Markson debriefed Clara in a quiet room, showing her the transcripts. She read them in silence, lips pressed into a thin line. He really said I poisoned Max against him? Yes, Markson replied. And she really believed you wouldn't come looking? Clara shook her head, disbelief mingled with disgust. Rebecca used my son to fill the hole left by losing hers. She manipulated Ian by pretending they were saving him, but in the end, they were just feeding their own delusions. That's how most objections like this start, Markson said quietly. Not with violence, with loneliness, obsession, fantasy. Max will need time, Clara said. He's still young, but this will leave marks, even if he can't name them yet. We have therapists ready, and you'll be part of every step. Clara stared at the evidence folder one more time. Rebecca's smiling application photo, Ian's angry favor, phototest's photo that renamed her son. Then she closed the folder gently and stood. I'm not afraid of their delusions, she said. I'm afraid of the silence that could have followed if I hadn't acted. If I'd stayed quiet, polite, compliant. If I'd waited for the system to fix what it almost missed. You didn't wait, Markson said. You followed your instincts. That saved Max. Clara nodded, then glanced at the mirror where she knew Max was likely watching cartoons under a blanket with a counselor nearby. I'm not just going to bring him home, she said. I'm going to bring him back to himself. Markson gave a nod of respect, and we'll make sure those who tried to erase that identity never get the chance again. But even as the legal machinery moved forward, Clara knew that what came next wouldn't be simple. It would be days and weeks of rebuilding trust, of answering small questions with bigger truths, of learning which memories Max kept and which had been overwritten by someone else's narrative. And she would be there for all of it. The temporary shelter that housed children in transition was located just off a quiet county road, its exterior deceptively cheerful, with hand-painted murals of forests and animals on the walls. But Clara could sense the tension even before she stepped through the main doors. A social worker named Elaine greeted her in the lobby, her expression professional but kind. Clara, thank you for coming. I know this is a lot to ask, but Luke is having a very difficult time. He hasn't spoken much since last night. Only repeats one thing. Clara tightened her grip on the small stuffed dinosaur Max had insisted on bringing. What does he say? He keeps asking for his brother, Elaine said gently. He doesn't understand what happened. He thinks Max is his real sibling. Clara nodded slowly. Lived together like brothers. For him, that was real. Elaine led her down a narrow hallway to a playroom dimly lit with afternoon sun. Max was already inside, building a crude black tower on the rug, his shoulders slightly hunched in that posture he had when trying to act normal while clearly on edge. On the opposite side of the room, a small boy sat in the corner, arms wrapped around his knees. His clothes were wrinkled, and his dark brown eyes watched the doorway with a kind of wounded suspicion that made Clara's chest ache. Luca! As soon as he saw Max, he stood. Mason? He cried, rushing across the room. Claire froze as Max looked up, blinking. It's me, Luca. Where'd you go? The boy barreled into Max, throwing his arms around his shoulders, and for a moment the two stood tangled in an embrace that belonged to something far purer than the adults who had orchestrated their situation. Max hesitated, then gently patted Luca's back. Hi, he said softly. Hi. Claire remained at the threshold, her heart breaking. She had come here prepared to guide Max back to safety, to help him feel anchored again, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of another child whose world had just crumbled. Luca pulled back, his small hands gripping Max's sleeves. They took Mommy, he whispered, eyes welling up. I told her not to go. I said we should wait, but she said we had to be fast. She said you were my brother forever. Max didn't know what to say. He looked up at Clara helplessly, confusion plain on his face. "He thinks I'm still Mason," he murmured. Clara approached slowly and crouched beside them. "Hi, Luca," she said gently. "My name is Clara. I'm Max's mom." Luca's brow furrowed. "No, that's not right. Mason's mommy is mommy. She said so." His voice cracked. "He's my brother. We were going to live near the beach." Clara nodded. "I know she told you that, and I know you believed it. That's not your fault. But Max's real name is Max, and he's my little boy." Luca's lower lip trembled. "Then where's my brother?" he asked, voice barely audible. "Where do I go now?" The question hit harder than anything Clara had heard during this entire nightmare. Max reached out, held Luca's hand, and whispered, "I still like you." Luca's tears came all at once. He buried his face in Max's shirt, sobbing. Clara felt her own eyes sting. Behind her, Elaine watched quietly, offering no interruption. "I want to stay with him," Luca cried. "I don't want strangers. I don't want a new house. I want the one with the porch and the lake and our games." Max looked up at Clara. "Can he come with us?" he asked softly. Clara didn't answer immediately. She reached out, brushing Luca's hair from his face. "You've been very brave," she said, "and Max is lucky to have had someone so kind beside him these past few days." Luca sniffled, nodding. "Mommy said I'd be a big brother soon. She said Mason needed me." Clara's voice shook as she replied, "You were a good brother, even if things weren't the way they should have been." Elaine stepped forward. "Clara, we'll do everything we can to keep him safe. We're contacting extended family, but so far, there's no one—" Clara turned to her. "What happens to him in the meantime?" "Emergency foster care. Possibly relocation? Unless—" She hesitated. "Unless you file a request for temporary guardianship." Clara stared at her. "You're serious?" "You've already shown extraordinary care for his well-being," Elaine said, "and Max seems emotionally tied to him. The bond is undeniable. It may ease their adjustment, if you're willing—" Clara looked between Max and Luca. Two boys, both too young to understand how adults had torn apart their lives and tried to stick them back together with love. Two children bonded not by blood, but by survival. "It wouldn't be forever," Elaine added, "just until a long-term plan is found, but it could mean the difference between trauma and transition for Luca." Max tugged at Clara's sleeve. "He can come with us?" Clara swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded slowly. "Yes, honey, if that helps him feel safe." "We'll try." Luca's head jerked up. "Really?" Clara smiled softly. "Really? But it'll take a few days. We have to talk to some people, fill out some forms. You'll still have to stay here for now, okay?" Luca nodded, clinging to Max's side. "Okay, as long as he comes back." Clara sat beside them, drawing what their future looked like, but she knew what it wouldn't be: isolated, cold, built on false promises, and as Luca rested his head on her shoulder, Max's fingers still curled protectively around his, she felt the weight of a new responsibility settling onto her shoulders, heavy but clear. This wasn't the family she had imagined, but maybe, for now, it was the one they all needed. The paperwork sat heavy in Clara's lap as she waited in the family court office, the late autumn light casting long shadows across the room's beige walls. Max played quietly on the carpet beside her with a toy truck, his curls longer now, his eyes a little brighter with each passing week. Luca sat on the opposite end of the bench, scribbling intently in a coloring book someone had given him that morning. 3 months had passed since that chaotic day at the gas station, since the arrests, since the truth untangled itself from a web of longing, lies, and desperation. In those months, Claire had lived a dual reality, facing the painful rebuilding of trust with Max, and learning how to gently fold Luca into their lives without forcing or pretending. Every morning had been an exercise in patience, every bedtime a negotiation of fears and forgotten promises. Max had asked less about the cabin, more about his toys and the old routines he remembered, but Luca still whispered his mother's name in his sleep. Clara hadn't planned for this. The sleepless nights, the double lunchboxes, the meetings with social workers, child therapists, child liaisons, it had stretched her to the very edges of her capacity. And yet, every time she thought of saying no, of backing out of temporary custody and letting the system find someone else for Luca. She remembered the way he'd clung to Max, the way he'd looked at her with cautious hope. He had never asked to stay. He only asked not to be left behind. When the judge finally called her name, she rose, smoothing the front of her coat, reaching for both boys' hands. The courtroom was simple, the judge plain-spoken and practical, but the words he delivered struck with quiet finality. Based on the recommendation of the Department of Family Services, psychological evaluations, and the expressed interests of both minors, the court grants Clara Reynolds temporary guardianship of Luca Hanley under the provisions of special kinship custody. Clara's breath caught, the weight of the moment not celebratory but profound. It wasn't just about gaining custody, it was about being entrusted with a child who had been betrayed, not by malice, but by misguided love. After the hearing, while Luca helped Max buckle into the back seat of her car, a court clerk approached Clara with a small padded envelope. "This came through your attorney. It's from Rebecca." Clara hesitated before accepting it. That night, after the boys had fallen asleep, Max curled up with his dinosaur, Luca with a pillow he still called Cloudy, from the cabin. Clara opened the envelope in the quiet of her kitchen. Inside was a single handwritten letter, neat, unadorned. The paper trembled slightly in her hands as she began to read. "Clara, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't ask for it. What I did was unforgivable, not only to you, but to the children, especially Luca. I thought I was saving something. In truth, I was stealing. I convinced myself that I could rebuild what I had lost, that I could create a life where no one would be abandoned. But I was the one who abandoned reality. Luca was never meant to carry my weight. He deserved better, and now, thanks to you, he might have it. Thank you for not turning away from him. Thank you for giving him a chance to be loved without confusion. If he forgets me, I understand. If he remembers me with pain, I accept that. But if there is even one moment ahead where he laughs without fear, where he sleeps without waiting for someone to disappear, that will be enough. That will be more than I deserve. Thank you for being the mother I tried and failed to become. Rebecca." Clara folded the letter slowly and slipped it into a drawer she rarely opened, one filled with hospital bracelets, birth certificates, and other fragile memories. The next morning, Luca asked if he could take Max's hand on the walk to school. "Just in case he gets nervous," he said. Max looked up at Clara. "Can we both hold yours too?" They walked that way down the block, the three of them linked by fingers, history, and healing. And though Clara knew there would be more hard days ahead, more questions to answer, more ghosts to quiet, she also knew that what they had now was real. Not perfect, but rooted. Max had come back to her. Luca had found a place to land, and Clara, against all odds, had discovered a capacity for love that extended beyond bloodlines, beyond fear, and even beyond the deepest betrayal. They were not a traditional family, but they were, in every important way, a true one. If you enjoyed this story and want more true crime-inspired mysteries with emotional twists, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. We'd love to hear what you think. What moment in the story hit you the hardest? And where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below. We'll always read them